ready whenever. You good?
You're good.
Okay. Muhammad Ali, arguably the greatest boxer of all time, described his boxing style with the following quote: float like a butterfly, sting like a bee." One could argue that Parkinson's disease is the same fighting style. Parkinson's disease is a large and puzzling disease. PD affects nearly 1 in 100 people over the age of 60, and a cure for the disease has eluded researchers for over 200 years now. During this speech this afternoon, I would like to highlight the basic topics of PD, of what PD is, the symptoms that affect patients, along with some risk factors involved, and the treatments that PD patients receive today. First, what Parkinson's disease is. So the history of it is that a man named James Parkinson, i.e. why the disease is called Parkinson's disease, first discovered it in 1817. He observed 6 different individuals and linked several movement impairments as a neurological syndrome. Over the years, in the 30s and 40s, doctors started to experiment with different surgeries, and these surgeries often lessen the tremors in the patients, which is the symptom that the disease is mostly known for. But it also was shown to induce paralysis. Later in the 60s, a Swedish researcher, Arvid Carlsson, looks about right, developed the drug L-Dopa, which is still used today, which basically replenishes and helps to inhibit and control, helps to replenish dopamine in the body and helps to inhibit and control the symptoms of Parkinson's disease. So it is a neurodegenerative disorder, which basically means it destroys your brain. So in PD specifically, it attacks the substantia nigra movement center in the brain, and it is also this area is charged with releasing dopamine to other areas of the brain to refine movement. But Parkinson's patients have a decrease in dopamine, so it affects movement mostly. So after talking about what PD is, next I would like to discuss the actual symptoms and a few risk factors in developing the disease. So I'm going to start with risk factors. The greatest risk factor is age. Additionally, men are more likely to develop the disease, and if you have a relative, a first-degree relative, so like a parent, a sibling, a child who has the disease, you're 50% more likely, twice as likely to develop PD. Environmental risks and factors can include things like exposure to pesticides or living in rural areas or near industrial plants. Additionally, smoking actually reduces the chance of getting the disease, but obviously the risk in that outweighs the reward. So caffeine actually has the same effect. So if you're looking to reduce your chances, drink a lot of coffees and sodas. So there's 2 different kinds of symptoms, physical and then non-physical. So some of the main physical ones would be tremors, and the common one is called a pill rolling tremor. So it basically looks like you're rolling something back and forth in between your fingers or your hand or whatever. You can also develop rigid muscles, which is slowing of the movements. You can also, and your body slows down, so things like activities like walking and shaving and eating, you slow down. You have stability issues, loss of facial expression, things like that. Some non-physical symptoms can include depression, sleeping issues like nightmares and restlessness, and then emotional change. Oftentimes patients experience insecurities and irritability a lot more than they used to. You can also experience constipation. So in concluding talking about risk factors from PD and the symptoms associated with the disease, I would like to finally talk about the treatment for the disease. So the treatment today, there is currently no actual cure, just medicines and surgeries that can alleviate the symptoms or suppress them for a while, but the disease can't actually be stopped. So non-medical treatments just include stuff like living a healthy lifestyle, like good exercise, so that you can basically keep your body from becoming rigid in movement, and maintaining proper nutrition. Medical treatments include L-Dopa, as I mentioned earlier, is that drug from the 60s. It's still used to replenish dopamine, and it's still the most common drug administered to PD patients. And there's in most L-Dopa prescriptions, there's also a separate medication that inhibits the enzyme that breaks down dopamine so that it lasts longer. There are also several surgeries that you can do where they attack different parts of the brain and subside so that the symptoms subside. But those are the basic treatments. So to conclude, I would like to leave the audience with 2 facts on Parkinson's.org before I summarize. Nearly 60,000 Americans are diagnosed with PD each year, and additionally, the direct and indirect cost of PD is $52 billion in the U.S. alone each year. So, in conclusion, PD is a neurodegenerative disorder that affects the movement centers of the brain and dopamine production. This disease currently has no cure and has a long list of symptoms that worsen over time, but with proper medications and a dedication to exercise and nutrition, can be managed for many years, and a patient can live many years after contracting PD.